I told her that she needs to get over herself. It's not how life works. You're gonna die. Welcome back to the Abundant Harvest Homestead. I'm Papa Pepper. Behind me you see some of my shop that I'm setting up shop for the apocalypse, right? Recently I told the lady at the post office that she needs to get over herself. She may even watch this, so let me explain this. And I've got kind of a 2-for-1 special today because you may need to get over yourself too. And that falls into a couple different categories, and pretty much there's a lot of things that some people think that is just simply not how life works. And if you don't get your head right ahead of time, you're gonna set yourself up for failure. Failure can mean death, so it might be really important for you to get over yourself. I remember some time ago, I was at a family's house, and the mom just had a whole bunch of stuff on the shelf, right? It was all store-bought stuff. And there's a certain amount of nostalgia when you have all these homegrown, home-canned, home-prepped stuff in your own little root cellar, your own pantry, and there's this kind of like homesteading nostalgia to it, and it all looks so homemade and rich and DIY. We did it all ourselves, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times, that's not how reality works out, and I'll tell you what, you can't just go to bed one night living the American dream, the traditional American way, the way that people have been doing it now for a bit, and wake up the next morning and boom, you're acing it as a homesteader. You're eating 90 to 95% of your own homegrown and home harvested stuff. The meat you have is all canned up and it's wild harvested venison or organic grass-fed sheep you've done yourself. And you know, every jar of fruit and vegetables is stuff from trees you planted on your own property. It's your heirloom seeds that you've been saving for 5 generations now, and that's what's canned up in your little canned tomatoes. Sometimes it's gonna be something like this. The comment that the lady made at the house that I was at was, I need to feed my family. I really don't care. Sometimes it's gonna look like this. It's not always gonna look like this. This is some sucker we shot ourselves and canned. Way better than canned tuna. We did it ourselves. That's great. And we can make a couple hundred jars of these a year. But until I get to that point, I would rather have something in the pantry. Something. So one thing to think about, guys, especially right now, like this, 50 cents maybe just slightly over. I can go to the store, buy this, 50 cents. Did I? Oh yeah. Yeah, I did. And why? One, I'm not gardening this year. Giving our land a Sabbath year of rest. But two, that dollar is going to decrease in value eventually. This is going to cost more than 50 cents. So if I get some now and I can have them for a while, that's fine. If I have a pantry full of stuff like this, I'm okay with that. And we're wise enough that we can use the cans once we open them. It's not just all waste. Some people dump stuff like that in the woods or send it to the landfill. Some people at least recycle, but they can be useful tools too. But before I get to this story about the woman at the post office, I want to tell you, you may need to get over yourself. It may be good to have these goals, but while you're on your way to the goal, feel free to pick up some extra stuff at the store. Feel free, if you're walking down the aisle at the grocery store or the supermarket and they've got a good deal on something, then buy some. It's okay to have tin cans from the store on your shelf, in your pantry, in your cupboard, in your root cellar. That's fine. As you progress, maybe further and further down the line, maybe you'll be able to be filling jars. Maybe you'll be able to be canning it yourself. Maybe you'll be able to increase every year the amount of food that you provide for your family from your own land or from your own area, from your own community. That's fine, but it doesn't need to be where your family is going to perish for the sake of nostalgia, for the sake of how something looks. Oh, we present it so nicely. Like even now, I'm covered in dirt and grease and grime. I was just changing the transmission out in our van, okay? I don't care. It's life. I figured I would record this and let some things render while I take a shower. So I'm a dirty, unpresentable guy in a video. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I've gotten over myself, okay? I don't need to go rub extra dirt on me for a video, but you know what I mean. There's some things that are just more important than the pleasantries. It'll look nicer, of course, if it's all homegrown and home processed, home preserved stuff in your cupboard. I get that. It'll look more like a Pinterest post or, something somebody shares on Facebook rather than here's a cupboard full of groceries that we bought. Tell you what, I would take a cupboard full of groceries that you bought over an empty cupboard every single day. So, my encouragement for people right now is whatever you're doing, prepare for the future. If you have some extra money right now, food is a great place to put it because later, what if you can only leave the house for necessities? And what if they only let you leave the house every once in a while or things like that? That happened a bit ago, guys. Have some extra at home. I'm not saying lockdowns are coming back. I'm not saying that everyone obeyed lockdowns. I'm just saying watch it. Learn from history, even if it's only a couple years worth of history. Have some extra food at home. It's okay to get it at the store. Like I said, with bow fishing, we can put up a couple 100 pint jars of canned fish every spring. So we do, and that's great. But until a couple years ago, I didn't know about that. I didn't know how to do that. I hadn't made it to that point in my life. So if I got some extra tuna or salmon or any canned meat, that's good, that's fine. It doesn't need to be DIY. It doesn't need to be something we've done ourselves. I've got a good amount of stuff we've done ourselves around here, but I've also got a good amount of the stuff from the store, and I'm okay with that, guys. Check some stuff that you guys like to eat. Get a stock. Rather than picking up a can, pick up a 12-pack or a 24-pack and work your way through it. And when you get halfway done, buy another one and put that under the first one. Okay, and then finish working your way through the first one, then move on to the second one. Start up some sort of rotation, but build up some sort of pantry. Build up some kind of on-hand food source that you guys can have to take care of your family for. That's one of the ways that you might need to get over yourself to provide for your family. And then there's another way, which is what I kind of was getting at when I talked to the lady at the post office. Now, first of all, let me make it very clear. Did I tell the lady at the post office that she needed to get over herself? Yes, I did. I did not do so in front of my children. I wasn't trying to do so in a disrespectful way, but at least in a way which caught her enough off guard that it really made her think. But here's the deal. Some people, and I'm just using one as an example, and I appreciate this lady, I like this lady, we have a good relationship, but she's one of those people who, over time, has become accustomed to certain things. I'm not going to use all examples from her life that I've heard straight from her mouth, but I'll use them from a broad category of people of which she fits into somewhere, and you may know some of these type of people too. They're people who say things like, oh, well, I could never eat that. Yeah, I don't really like that. Well, I tried it once years ago when I was a kid, but I'm not into that. Or a whole list of other things where, there's some people, I've met some, oh, I don't really like fish. Really? Like, you don't like fish? Like, that's fine to say, but the thing you don't understand is there's baked fish, there's boiled fish, there's deep fried fish, there's this. We had canned sucker, like tuna salad sandwiches for lunch. That's a different way. You get a basket full of fish and chips or a tuna salad sandwich, those are very different things. You get some tuna casserole, that's a very different thing than a salmon patty even. And a salmon patty is much different than the garboils we make. We just did a delicious garboil just a bit ago here. Just to say I don't like fish, you really don't understand what you're saying. Because fish is such a broad spectrum, even if we're just sticking to fins and scales and clean fish, it's a very broad spectrum. And the reason that I told this lady that she needed to get over herself is she mentioned that as she gets to her kind of permanent property, the one that they're going to set up to be on, and as they begin to work on building up their life from there, she goes, I really need to start watching more of your videos and paying attention on how to do things. We've got a lot about, foraging, about gardening, about how to get food from the wild. And the thing is that in that context, I said, well, you're going to need to get over yourself. And there was two people behind the counter. The other one was like, oh, I can't believe he just said that to her. But yeah, I did say that to her. And why did I say that to her? I said that to her because I care, and just like somebody who may shun this on their shelf over some peas they can themselves, you can't always be like, oh, well, I don't like wild game, or, whatever it may be. And the thing is, if you think, as many people do, that, stuff just hit the fan, it's do or die, I better start doing now. Like, that's not going to work out for you. If you have no frame of reference for how to get the food out of a deer, for instance, if you don't know how to get the food out of there and get it to the point you can eat it, you're not going to learn when it's do or die. You're going to struggle and try and probably fail and die. When you have a little wiggle room, a little room to breathe, a little room for air, leave room for air, you won't have room to breathe, That's the time to test and practice and learn. It's not when your back's against the wall and you've got one chance. That's not the time to learn. You've got to learn ahead of time. You may think that, I live close to a lake. Okay. Do you know how to fish? Do you know how to catch fish? I mean, I can catch fish with my bare hand. I can shoot fish. I can spearfish fish. I can catch fish in a net, throw them in a cast net. I can catch fish on a rod and reel. I can catch fish on a jugs. I can catch fish on a trot line. I can catch fish. There's a lot, and I can set up a number of traps even to catch fish. I can use a minnow trap. I think here's a crawfish trap, but that can work too, I know more than a half dozen different ways that I can catch fish, and sometimes I need to use multiple ones together. Sometimes I have to cast net bait to, then have bait to use a different method, whether it's jugging or using a pole. But I'm not going to wait till, the family's starving. I know there's some fish in this lake. Okay, how do we fish? Come on out. And then when I get a fish, well, what do I do with it from there? How do I clean it? How do I sit there? Like a sucker, for instance, is going to have more bones than most people would like. But if I pickle the sucker, the bones pretty much disintegrate. If I can the sucker, the bones pretty much disintegrate. Same thing with the carp. There's a lot of people who won't eat gar, for instance. They're going to look at a fish like some of these beasts behind me, and they're going to say, that's trash fish, that's too bony. If you're taking the boneless back straps out of there, which is 2/3 of the fish, there's no bones in it. If you're thinking it's too bony, it's just because you don't know. You stop when you hit the ribs, and all that's on the other side of the ribs is the guts. There's 2 big boneless back straps. I know how to get that food out of there. I know how to use that. And it wasn't even until last year that we ever caught one on a fishing pole. It wasn't until recently that we've been able to pull and harvest like this, where that's pretty much a week's worth of fishing, just a couple short mornings, going out and fishing with the kids for a bit. It's crazy. Check out some of the videos on our fishing channel if you want to check out some stuff, and I'm going to get into some better how-to videos with it, just so people can learn, because this is super important. One like that can feed my family and give us leftovers. I can catch one fish, feed my family of 9 people right now, and have leftovers, but I'm learning ahead of time. Do not think that you're just going to, boom, learn all these things the second you need to. Practice gardening now. Practice foraging now. I took a trip down the Buffalo National River. It was me and 5 other dads, and we each had at least one son with us. A couple of them had 2, so it was 6 dads and 9 boys. And we went with no food, no water, very simple fishing stuff. We had a couple of hooks and some line. That was essentially what we had to work with. No food, no water. And we went and caught some fish because we found some bait, and we harvested some wild edibles because it's illegal to do that at a state park here, but the Buffalo National River, that's okay to harvest wild edibles, so we did it there. And I'll tell you what, for my stomach, it was a learning curve. To pretty much survive on weeds and grass, it's a little bit of a shock. Even if you're incorporating them into your diet anyway, when it's do or die time and you've got to live off that stuff, it's a little harder than you think, so you better be practicing ahead of time. I wished it was a little later in the year so I could get things like the high protein greenbrier shoots and different stuff like that. Didn't have that option then, because we went right at the end of March, beginning of April. But we were able to find wild edibles. We had cleaver and chickweed and wild chives and redbud and, boy, what else was there? There was quite a few other ones there too. There was a bunch of different stuff, but we were able to do it, and it's still hard to get full just eating weeds. Thankfully, we had some small fish we caught, and I'll tell you what, roasting a fish on a fire like a marshmallow that's got some wild chive stuffed in it, super delicious, very tasty, but also practice ahead of time. It's difficult to do things when you really need to. Try sometime to do something simple that you know how to do with two people shouting over your shoulders at you to do it the whole time. That's a high stress environment. It becomes much more difficult even with stuff you know how to do. So how much more when things start collapsing, things start getting rough, and boy, your family, your hungry little children are looking to you to do something. If you have no frame of reference, you're not just going to magically start knowing everything and how to do it all ahead of time. Okay? Even our sheep here, we have to learn how to get the meat out of our sheep or our sheep are useless. Thankfully, we know how to butcher them. I've taught other people how to butcher them. There was one time I took some shanks, the back leg shanks off of the ram, and I hickory hot smoked them on just a little dome of rocks that I had. Went about 4 or 5 hours hot smoking them over some hickory. My wife, who likes seasoning a lot, was like, wow, how did you season these? These are amazing. I said, nothing. I didn't put any seasoning on it. It is simply the dead animal and the wood I used, and I combined those to make it this tasty. Have a palate for things. We may not always be able to get spices and seasonings and different things, but if we can have it and learn how to make it palatable without, then we're going to set ourselves up for success and not failure. That is so important. Now, I am not saying just completely lower your standard and keep a low standard and live from there. But I'm saying feel free to start where you are and take some steps in the direction of where you want to be. If you think that wild edibles may be very important because you'd be surprised at how much of what's in people's yards and the weeds that they pull out of their garden, like purslane and other stuff, is just amazing and incredible. But if you don't know how to use it or the fact that it is edible, you're going to have a much harder time. I mean, I can picture in cities, densely populated urban areas where people will be trampling all sorts of food that God made and put on the earth for us to eat while they try to break into somebody's house to steal some junk in a can and kill the person to get it. Yet they stepped over and stomped over something much more nutritious on the way to do it because of ignorance. We're in the information age and so many people are ignorant right now. Start somewhere. You may need to lower your ideal standard. Would we like to eat a much more higher percentage of things we produce ourselves? Sure, absolutely. But while we're getting there, we'll buy some extra cans. We're not beyond that. We're not. Now, there's certain things I should never really have to buy fish again. We're really good, and we're getting better with our relationship with the lake. There's a lot of things, the panfish, the bass, the carp, the sucker, the gar. We're getting really good at getting a lot of food out of there. And I mean, even just the other day, I prepped a bunch of gar bites. These kind of chicken tender, chicken nugget looking gar pieces that are already seasoned. They're already breaded. They're just ready to go in the deep fryer. And they're prepackaged and bagged up in good quantities for my family. But I needed some more room in the freezer to do that, so I took out some of our meat chickens that we raised ourselves, and I threw them in the smokehouse and smoked a bunch of those. Why? To make room in the freezer for the other stuff, because we're just bringing in that much of a harvest of gar right now. That's great. That's a good problem to have. In the future, we want to be canning more of that meat bird stuff, and we have in the past too. We've done a great job. We've always got room for improvement, but you gotta start somewhere and move forward from there. Sometimes you're gonna have to get over yourself. Okay, maybe you don't really like the taste of venison. How many different ways have you had it prepared? Did you just have one person who offered it to you once and you tasted that one sampling of it and said, oh, I don't like that? Because a lot of times I can't tell the difference between venison and beef or some of the different things we eat. It's like, what is this? Oh, okay. Because it just tastes good. It tastes good. It tastes like meat. It tastes normal, but we know how to cook it. We know how to prepare it in a way that we enjoy. There's so many different recipes for wild game, so many different recipes for homestead animals, so many different ways to prepare fish, and so many different kinds of fish that are edible. Don't just hone in and say, I don't like that, and put yourself in that category, because what you do is you build yourself up as this giant mountain that eventually, if you're not able to get over yourself, you're not going to make it where you need to go. Don't become that person. Don't become so opinionated and so set in your ways that you're setting yourself up for failure. Often there's people depending on you. So maybe humble yourself. Get over yourself. Step out of your comfort zone. I mean, look at me, right? I'm not a mechanic, but I'm down under the vehicle helping my mechanic, having my son Monster Truck watch and learn so he's got a frame of reference, stepping out of my comfort zone. Even making a video like this is actually quite a bit out of my comfort zone, but I've grown accustomed to it because I stepped out of my comfort zone as a way to potentially work on some relationships and provide something for my family. You know, get over yourself, step out of your comfort zone. Now is the time to practice. Now is the time to prepare. Do this until you can do this. You know, do something while you're waiting to learn how to do something ideal for you. And even this, there's plenty of people who will eat tuna all the time, but you tell them you got some canned sucker or canned carp, and they'll turn their noses up at it. Why? Because they're ignorant, because they don't know, because they have prejudices, and because they're not getting over themselves. The people who've eaten this have either not been able to tell the difference, and once we told them there was a difference, several of them said they prefer this to store-bought tuna. Isn't that crazy? I know people who will only eat white eggs. They don't want to eat brown eggs. You know, they'll only eat eggs from the store. They don't want to eat eggs from a homestead. Those people need to get over themselves. And I'll tell you what, too. If they don't, I guess that's just going to leave a whole lot more food for the rest of us. That's the raw reality of it. Life does not work that you just keep building up all these prejudices, you just keep kind of barricading yourself in, you just keep kind of stiff-arming all these things that are, you know, beneficial to you, and then things get really bad and you just suddenly turn around 180 degrees, and just like that, like the flip of a switch, you're munching on all these wild edibles, and you're harvesting this wild game, and you're raising these animals and harvesting them yourself, and you got blood on your hands, and you're rinsing it off, and you're trying to figure out how do I get the liver out of here without popping the gallbladder, and which parts of these are edible. You don't magically just learn it overnight. You prepare now so you're prepared in the future, and if you've got little ones around you, you'd be surprised. This hand, reaching in the chicken and trying to get stuff out versus one of my children's hands, which is significantly smaller, it's amazing the better job that they can do just because of their size with some of this stuff. It's absolutely amazing. But we give them the opportunity, they have a frame of reference, and then they have a confidence with it. And when they're young and they want to help, we let them. And then as they grow in skill and age, they still want to help because we let them. We didn't crush that spirit who wanted to be there with us and wanted to help us and said, no, you're too little, we'll wait for the future. Too many people do that, and then by the time they get to the future, when their kids are big enough to help, they don't want to help anymore because they crushed that willing desire within them. We don't like to do that. So honestly, it was in all love and care and concern for the person that I told her she needs to get over herself. That's the point of view from which I spoke. And hopefully she'll heed it, but sometimes people need to even hear it put that type of way. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm not trying to bully people, I'm not trying to belittle people, but some people could do good to be a little littler, to humble themselves a bit, to not become such a big mountain that's so hard to get over. You know, kind of the lower you are, the easier going you are, the easier you are to get over for yourself. And if you can get over yourself, I think there's a whole incredible world out there just waiting. And that's one of the reasons that we try to raise our children the way that we do, because we don't want them growing up with these huge prejudices and biases that are very difficult to shed when you get older. You know, they say it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks and that people become very set in their ways. We don't want to become just boxed into some little thing. We want to be able to experience what's been provided for us and really flourish in our environment, and that's why we set ourselves up for the future. But we do things now because we have to live in such a way in the present that when we get to the future, we won't regret our past. It's very important to me. And hopefully that becomes more and more important to you. Guys, it's an ever-changing world out there. There's not a lot of good news most days. Things keep getting highly manipulated, highly compromised, and I am not excited about a lot of things they're probably going to send our way down the pipeline. But I see it coming, so I'm going to prepare. I'm working on getting over myself. There's still a lot of me I need to get over too, and I'm working on it. I only hope that y'all will join me on that journey. I'll see you next time. Papa out. Peace.